Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Future Tech Summit webinar series in partnership with ICTA and Axiata Digital Labs. Introducing your moderator for the evening, please welcome Mr. Sachindra Samararatne, Associate Chief Digital Economy Officer of ICTA.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Warm welcome to you all for the Future Tech Summit. And today we are focusing on a very important topic, which is very prevalent to our industry as well. Very prevalent because our industry is looking at becoming a niche player in an area of where we are sustainable, where we are responsible, especially responsible for our future generations. It's great that we have a really great audience here. And to respect that, we have a really great panel who's a mix of technology specialists, a mix of passionate climate advisors, and professionals who have been driving companies towards sustainability. So I hope that you will be encouraged to move your organizations towards a greener economy. I hope you will be inspired to at least take that first step after the discussions are over. How we will take on today's proceedings is we have 3 presentations lined up, each 15 minutes. And the 3 presenters, the 3 panelists will talk about the same problem in terms of a greener economy from 3 different angles. And then we will also have a small quiz in the middle. Plus, we will end with a 30-minute Q&A session. So do line up your questions, clarifications, because at the end of this, we don't want this to be a knowledge exercise. We want something done. We want at least one action taken by you, by us, and all of us together, because we don't have a lot of time to think about this or have debates about this. It's time that we action certain things. So let me introduce the panelists to you. Share my screen. As the first panelist, it's my privilege to introduce Ranga Pallavala. He's a very passionate climate change and environment policy expert. He currently works with EU, European Union, Switch Asia Policy Support Component. Earlier to EU, he was the Climate Finance Advisor under the Commonwealth Climate Finance Access Hub. He has over 20 years of professional experience in climate change, in sustainable development and circular economy. He was educated in agriculture at University of Peradeniya and with a master's in environment management. He will set the stage on the subject and give us the necessary information in terms of what is really happening with the world right now. After Ranga, Indika de Soisa will take stage. He is currently the strategic advisor and the vice president of Huawei Technologies, Lanka. Before Huawei, he worked at the ICTA agency of Sri Lanka as a senior consultant, working towards transforming Sri Lanka into a creative knowledge-based society through empowered citizens. Before ICTA, we all know Indika as Intel Indika because he was the first country manager of Intel in Sri Lanka, which he performed for 15 years and ensured that the PC penetration in Sri Lanka grew at a large scale. And we are happy and honored to have Indika speaking to us, especially from our angle of a technology specialist and an industry specialist, currently being the chairman of FITIS, the Federation of Information Technology Industry Sri Lanka. And then it's my privilege to introduce to you Adeline Sinaya. She is the head of sustainability at Axiata Group, also with 20 plus years of experience in consulting and corporate planning. Her expertise is in environmental management, sustainability, and the verification of non-financial data. She heads sustainability at the Axiata Group and also is the program director of Axiata Foundation. She has been given the very important responsibility of driving Axiata to net zero carbon, driving the roadmap towards net zero, which she is currently involved in. So with that, I would first invite Ranga to take the stage and then educate us on what is a circular economy, what is this green economy, is it just jargon, what is ESG, what is this all about? Inspire us, educate us, and set the stage. Ranga, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sachindra, and thank you so much for the invitation. And before I move into my presentation, the topic, I would like to show the two photographs for everybody who's participating today. These are very historical photographs, actually. Those were taken in January 2019. This is the first time the human civilization managed to sprout seeds from Earth, outside Earth. This was done on the moon, the far side of the moon. And a group of Chinese scientists have done it. And they were thinking of creating a planet B for us, in case if there's some sort of a wrong with the planet Earth, we have somewhere else to move our civilization. But unfortunately, we have drastically failed because the sprouted seed lasted only 2 days. Simple thing because of that. The moon, of course, there has a kind of a 15-day day period and a 15-day night period. That's how the moon rotates around the sun. And during the night time, the temperature goes down to like almost minus 75, minus 80 degrees Celsius. And during the daytime, the temperature rises to around 200 Celsius. And none of the plants or living beings cannot withstand these temperature fluctuations because the moon doesn't have an atmosphere. I just want to tell you that the atmosphere is there and it provides certain services and it's been granted. And we never think that those ecosystem services provided by the natural environment, it's not counted, it's not accounted, it's not valued. Unfortunately, we are paying the price for it. So I'm moving with my presentation in role of IT industry in climate change, circular economy, and sustainable development. So my outline is very simple. I'm just trying to introduce the terms of what is ecosystem sustainability, the current, the status quo, and the projection of the natural environment and the global policy trajectories that goes along with the current and the projected situations, and what kind of a role that IT industry can play. And also I would like to mention few examples, some examples that IT can do, because I'm not an IT expert. Probably you can use this information to generate a little bit more idea. So my probing question for this the particular presentation is that living the life, what does it mean for you? Living the life for people is a different thing, right? It's about having a good education, comfortable life, probably a car, probably a house, traveling, enjoy your hobby, having a peaceful life, be with your friends, family close together, comfortable life. Many things can come with. But you do everything in a closed system, where because our Earth is a closed system, and all the material within that Earth is going in circular ways, in cycles, and it's powered by sun. All the energy that we require to sustain this particular system is powered by sun. And within that closed system, there are four enclosed interacting spheres. One is atmosphere, which we have all the air and everything, the oxygen, the atmospheric composition. in your basic learnings. And we have biosphere, where all the living beings, fauna and flora. And then we have the hydrosphere, where you have all forms of water. It can be liquid, gaseous, or solid, ice, etc. And then we have lithosphere, or the geosphere, where you have all soil and the minerals and stuff. And all these systems are interacting each other. And these interactions and the closed systems provide you everything that you want to live, you want to enjoy in this world, from your basic needs or for your consumption needs or basic living things. Everything is provided this. Your hobby, your car, your dress, your computer, the IT system, everything coming with this. And unfortunately, we have not realized this, because all the material in these spheres goes in cycles. It has a natural cycles of degradation and regeneration. That's how it, and different materials has different cycles and timings for regenerations. Some takes very long time, and some takes in kind of a very short times. For example, let's take carbon, and all the fossil fuel that we are using as coal, petrol, oil, whatever, is coming as a long process of regeneration of underneath carbon under pressurized conditions. And it needs millions of years to generate that. Water, same. So everything goes in cycles. But what happened is that our social and economic systems that we have developed has a huge mismatch, huge dissonance, because our systems are very much linear. We are not considering it as cycles. It's like we extract certain things, we produce something, we consume something, remaining will go as waste. It's very linear. So there's a huge mismatch, and this mismatch in the social and economic system, these are not natural. All the social and economic system has been created by us, and we enjoy that, and we keep on maintaining that. And those systems are very linear, and there's a huge mismatch. And that mismatch has created an issue, what you call the overshooting the boundaries, overshooting the regeneration rates. The cycles have been avoided or ignored. So the current economic systems, social systems, promote excessive extraction of resources, material, everything from the four spheres in this closed system that I mentioned. And it has overtaken the regeneration rate. For example, we cut down trees and we build furnitures or use it for any other purposes, but we have overtaken the growth rates of new trees. So what happened? The forest covers and the tree cover is reducing. Same thing happens with the minerals and atmosphere, so many things. And you can see a graphical representation of that. We have already overshooten the biodiversity loss country, and it's almost impossible for us to regenerate the biodiversity that we had to restore. Same with nitrogen cycle, and we are almost overshooting the phosphorus cycle as well. And the climate change, we have already overshot the boundaries that could have regenerated to the original situation. So we have already overshot some of the particular aspects of the environment, and we are in the process of going back. And what happened is it makes the entire world unsustainable. We can't go like this. If we continue the business as usual projections in the economy, social aspects, we will stop somewhere, because we will run out of fuel or the resources or the material that we require. And we create unhealthy, unsustainable situations for us to live. And it also widening the gap between the haves and have-nots, basically inequality. The people who enjoy pure drinking water and people who don't have enough water, of course, the gap is widening, and we don't see it, but it's happening, and all the statistics and all the scientific findings are supporting this argument. This is an interesting picture. You can see what you call the overshoot day. Overshoot day, this is a research group called Global Footprint Network. They do a research. They look at how much of consumption happened in different countries, and they look at the natural regeneration cycles, and they find out, okay, at what point they are overshooting the natural boundaries, in what day. If the day starts on January 1st, how it happened, and you can see different countries reaching that day in a different time. Unfortunately, none of the countries have passed 335 days, 65 days. That means 1 year, before 1 year of the regeneration rate, we all go in that. And one of the question is, what's the Sri Lanka's one? For 2023, it's coming up, it's 2nd August. By 2nd August, all the Sri Lankans will utilize all the resources that we can consume without overshooting the natural boundaries. So what we need to do is that we need to push back this day as much as possible, passing 31st January as much as possible, then allow this world to heal and create a sustainable world where we can maintain our lives and our economies and our societies as we wish, right? So this is the issue. This is the big problem, and now the problem is in front of us, and how to solve this. So there's a problem, and how to solve this. And there are two technical approaches to if you want to solve this. The first one is the extreme approach. That is, we forget about the current living standards and we go back to our old living cycle, living styles, the standards. We go back to jungles, basically. But none of us willing to do that. We can't do that, basically. I think it creates another social dilemma and a social issue. So the second approach is a defensive approach, where that we maintain our living standards, but within the boundaries. So we need to do certain adjustments to whatever the social and economic processes that we have developed. All the sectors, all the industries need to do it. So as the modern scientists, modern world have opted to go for the second approach, this defensive approach, but still you need to do certain adjustments. And it's this entire discussion about sustainability is how soon we can make that adjustment and how far we will make that adjustment and how willing everybody to do these adjustments. So graphically mentioning this about two things. It's about the bending curves. It's about if you want to maintain the human well-being and the economic activities or the growth or GDP, whatever, at the same level, what we need to do is we need to decoupling the environment impacts and the decoupling of the resource utilization. Because if you look at the current economic activity, higher the GDP, higher the resource utilization. Higher the GDP, higher the environmental negative impacts. So how to decoupling is that the approach for development, approach for economic activities, and the approach towards the human well-being need to be changed. So this decoupling process cannot happen overnight. It needs to do a kind of a transformative process. And at the same time, it requires global collaboration. One single country, one district, or one industry can't do it because we are sharing the same boundaries. We are sharing one whole closed system called planet Earth, and that's our world. So it's a transformative process. You can't do it overnight because we have established certain systems, and that systems cannot be disturbed one day. For example, who would like to ditch your car now and travel in a kind of a environmentally friendly transport mode? You can't do it. How many vehicles will be abandoned, and what kind of a resource impact will be there, and what sort of an impact will be there on the economy? How many of you would like to turn off the ACs and work in the office at the moment? Probably you can't do it. And do you have 100% renewable energy? So you can't have it in one single day or overnight or 1 year. It's a process. So this transformative process through a global collaboration is the only solution we have to decouple the growth versus resource utilization or the negative environmental impacts. So that's what we are talking about, this sustainability approach in the business and in the economies. One question that most of the people ask me, okay, right, this looks like very theoretical. It looks like a fairy tale. Do we have any success story to show that we have successfully decoupled the economic activity and the environmental negative impacts? One of the most recent, the example is the ozone layer healing. If you can remember, of course, I'm now 40 plus, and during my childhood, I have heard this hole in the ozone layer, and it creates a lot of skin cancers because the infrared rays from the sun directly coming in, because the ozone layer protecting us from the negative rays from sun has been damaged, and there's a huge hole. And then the scientists came up with the process, and they have come up with a global collaboration process, established what you call the Montreal Protocol, to phase out all the ozone damaging aerosols from our consumption, from the refrigerations and from air conditioning. We use a lot of ozone damaging aerosols. And there was a global collaboration, and we have successfully implemented that. And now we have successfully healed the ozone layer, and we are in the process. And it's a transformative process. Each and every country, every industry played a role there. And it's turning from changing the technologies, changing the trade aspects, changing the marketing, everything happened. So we can do it. All what we need to do is that the commitment and the will. And if they have it, if we have the correct pathway, we can do it. So what are the global collaborations happening in towards sustainability? There are so many, endless number, but I have mentioned only few. Paris Agreement, you might have heard, for climate change, which is under the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. It's a global agreement how to tackle climate change. And we have the Convention on Biological Diversity, Montreal Protocol I have mentioned. And now we are negotiating, all the countries are negotiating for a global treaty on plastic pollution, preventing plastic pollution, because the ocean and water plastic, microplastics have increased significantly, going beyond the healthy levels. So we need to prevent that. We need to phase out from plastics, and it's a transformative process. So likewise, there are so many global standards, collaborations, protocols, treaties are there, where most of the countries have signed up and working towards. And even regional.
Ranga, maybe
Yes.
you can conclude in about a minute.
Yeah, sure. And the regional collaborations as well. So telling one is about the Paris Agreement. Probably we might be able to hear about net zero as well. The Paris Agreement is something like that. It's about changing predictable climates because of the extreme scenarios created with high greenhouse gas emissions, including carbon dioxide. Earlier, we thought it's been done by the developed countries, those who have historical responsibilities, and we were thinking that they need to do certain things. But it happened, but other countries also went in the same pathway. Now we are thinking of bridging that gap, going through what you call the national determined contributions. We determine what kind of a contribution we can go into that kind of a targets. And in once in 5 years, we renew that targets to reach what you call the 2050 net zero targets. Action towards sustainability, there are so many. One or two, it's about renewable energy transition, optimizing travel, so many things. It's endless. But how to do that through IT industry is important. What I see is the IT industry has the opportunity to support this transformative process in two ways. One is supporting in the design and implementation of the actions. Third one is MRV, what you call the measuring, reporting, and verification. I'm going to give you 3 examples, and then I will conclude. One is, this is a platform, what you call the a Solar Plus module, where they have did kind of an end-to-end renewable energy sales and management platform. Without IT, we can't manage renewable energy because we don't know where the demand and where the supply is. And in Sri Lanka, we do it manually, actually. So if the IT can come in and with the smart grids, you can do wonders there. And we have seen the e-timber tracking in Ukraine, where now we are talking about sustainable timber, where the timber should be cultivated, not like cutting the forest down. How to track it? There are blockchain-based systems coming up. And converting into products into service is another aspect. For example, I'm telling you about lights. You buy a light bulb, but instead of buying a bulb, what you can buy is like lighting services, amount of light that you want. So a company can come up and give you a bulb and they will provide you light and you will pay for the light, the duration. But for that, IT is important for these business models to come in, and it's happening in the washing as well. And resource optimization and automation is another way where you need to do. I'm saying that IT industry can play a big role, but at the same time, there are risks as well. Number one is like new global standards are coming in. So IT industry might also need to abide with these things. And certain things coming is voluntary, but unfortunately, because of the overshooting limit, the voluntary space is shrinking and we need to do a must kind of a thing. And escalating cost is something. I can talk about more the things like the border carbon adjustment mechanism, where you will be taxed based on the level of pollutions at the different countries. So these are risks that the IT industry need to come into. So with that, I'll stop my presentation. Probably during the discussions, I will put up more points along with this. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ranga. Apologies for having to ask you to cut it short. I know it's very interesting. It's setting the stage, and I hope the audience now know the problem really well and understand what the causes and effects are of the world that we are exactly going through, the world that we are living in. And Ranga brought it to a point of, I would say, a majority of professionals who are here who are part of the IT sector, and then handing over to Indika from a technology or digital or IT point of view, where Ranga placed us with some of the solutions as well, what IT can bring in. I would welcome Indika now to talk more about from an industry standpoint on how we would bring solutions to some of the problems that we ourselves are sometimes creating. Over to you, Indika.
Thank you, Sachindra. So let me share my screen. Hope my screen is visible.
All good, Indika.
Yes.
You may proceed.
Okay, thank you, Sachindra. So I will basically take a lead from what Ranga spoke about. He spoke about two technical approaches, and already the world has decided to move on the number two, and how we are looking at it from a industry point of view, and what are the trends actually leading through that. This talks about, all of us knows that we are right now living through the fourth industrial revolution, and we are talking about the fifth one already. As Ranga very well explained also, which is the convergence happening with the information technology, or the digital part is coming in, and which is moving into the 5G to AI to cloud to IoT, etc. And whereas the from the bottom line, which is, you can say, the traditional fossil energy to clean energy is moving in. So which is the fifth industrial revolution actually will merge that the carbon neutrality and digital intelligence transformation will happen. So it's going to be a challenging time because right now with through the digital economic activities, definitely there's a there's a lot of changes are happening towards carbon neutrality, but the increased amount of technology getting adapted in the system, there's a generation of carbon is getting increased. And going a little further, this will give you a picture, like, digital economy has become a very focused domain across the world. Like, the contribution to the GDP has become a huge factor. So there's no way countries can actually slow down the activities, what they are doing, adoption of technology, etc., because that has a huge correlation between the GDP for the country, as well as, like, contribution coming from a digital economy point of view. When you see that high income countries are crossing about 50%, even low income countries are getting close to 20% on the digital economy. So the point is, like, there's no way we can go back, or, like, as Ranga said, as a point number one, do we go to the traditional way of living it? That has become like a no situation right now with the challenges we are faced right now. across the world. So when you're looking at adoption of technology is getting into everything what we do, for education to retail to banking to automobile, etc. So this data is little little old, but amount of the transaction getting in compounded annual growth is about close to 20% or so, and industry landscape is completely changing. So now with the COVID last 3 years or so, that again, when you're looking at the few segment into three, starters, adapters, and frontiers as domains, when you're looking at it, the GDP is degrowth. But when you're looking at the percentage of degrowth, that IT budgets have stayed more stronger. So that means whatever happened, IT investment continues to go through, and it continued. So what this means is, from a modern world, which is we are talking about the intelligent world, all things are sensing, things are getting connected, and it's basically getting into AI. So this is the world we are living in right now. So there's no way we can go back, which is we are further and further and further strengthening. But when you're looking at the bottom, where as I put it as the broadband, data centers, cloud computing, big data, etc., which is we are consuming a lot of energy, and this is where the challenge actually being faced right now. Now, if you look at this slide, it gives you a clear picture. Where are we right now? So ICT is about 1.4% of the global carbon emission. It talks about operations, supply chain, and customers. When you're looking at from a device use as well as device manufacturing, actually being possibly the biggest contributors, close to maybe 55% of that. And the global average is on the carbon emission at about 90%. But when you from a communication technology industry as such, it is far, far higher. Maybe Adeline will talk about possibly from that side of the world, how we are changing that and what exactly we are looking at it. So when you're looking at the data points, the first few slides what I took through, how the digital adoption is happening, how critical is for us to do that adoption as a nation or as countries, how well they will do that to be ahead of the competition, as well as to give better life to their people. But the carbon emission has become a very much challenge. So this is as I said, we are living through this fourth industrial revolution right now, which is moving toward the fifth, which is we need to make sure that right decisions have made and right things has been done. But this has been identified as a problem already. So there are a lot of activities are happening from the industry associations or industry-led bodies, which is GSMA, ITU, etc. There are set goals. Some of these data may be a little older, but this gives you an indication this problem has been already identified. It's not the case of we are putting as a IT industry putting a blind eye and going through that. They have identified what need to be done. And voluntarily, there are a lot of activities as are happening, and there are a lot of joint activities together with industry-led associations, as well as some of the here some of the telco companies, which is talking about how they're talking about reducing their carbon footprint in large scales in 2030, 2040, etc. So the problem has been well identified. It is getting addressed, but there are certain challenges also has been faced. Now, this is obviously a shared global vision. There's no way we can get out of it. Even Ranga spoke about the Paris Agreement, which is there. There are country-wise there. Some state agreements have come in, like countries like China, US, Japan, India, etc. There are European Union they're talking about. So some of the net zero pledges, which is been about 133 countries have been signed. The number is getting increased. The cities have signed. So many people are getting impacted. So right across, commonly, IT industry together with the rest of the world is actually sharing or working towards this mitigating it. So again, industries are decarbonization. This is obvious, which is on the right hand side of the screen, which is you can see how the shift is happening on the renewable energy. and the convergence of the digital and the power electronics technology, etc. Ranga spoke about the smart grids and how the technology will be used in domains to monitor this. So this is where the convergence is happening, and definitely that technology or the IT industry is helping, or getting into these domains to help to manage the traditional methods of monitoring, etc., which is with the tools which is coming with the technology involvement. And I will not go in detail as well with the limitation of the time we have. There are multiple policies, specifically Europe is talking about. They're talking about solar PV scaling up and more economic growth, which is they're talking about. There are countries like Germany, France, Spain, etc., how they are moving towards these changes. And also they're talking about fade-in tariff, what you call the FIT, main subsidies given for policies most for European countries. So these are some of the policies levels which is European Union has actually taken in to consideration. And when you're looking at some of the samples which you take, there are a lot of other countries, policy level subsidies, tax, etc., has been given. So one of the things is when you are moving from what you are in traditionally, as well as getting into the newer technologies, which is with the carbon neutrality, there's a lot of investment is required. So there's some amount of incentives are required for people to move faster to the newer technologies, etc. So which is Vietnam is talking about subsidies and direct purchase agreement, which is they are getting with the industry. And PV subsidies, what Japan is talking about, US is talking about billions of dollars getting invested in grids, etc. And also they're talking about investment tax credit, all that. So even India is looking at rooftop PV installment plans. So this is how the policies of different countries are moving towards the right direction. Additionally, this is something specific, again, the US, there are innovative approaches in the taxes and subsidies. Also, they are looking at large scale energy storages in US. A lot of subsidies has been given. Even some of the states, states like California has introduced additional subsidies, tax policies, which is there in those respective states to get into the carbon neutrality. So, energy itself has become a problem. So this is the way they have actually handling it. So you can see the storage, battery storage, etc., is getting increased, which is you can see the graph from 2015 to 2023, how the shift has actually moved through. So I will take for one or two slides, which is talk about where the IT industry company where I'm attached to as well, how responsibly we are working towards that, some of the points what Ranga spoke about, how technology happened. So this is where most of the technology companies are working in. How do you get that integrated done? We're talking about the greenhouses, green buildings, green factories, green campuses, green villages, green cities, etc. So which is technology via the tools are getting built on how these entire grid management can be done. And specifically, there are focus segments. There are a lot of R&D spent has been done for this, what is getting to what you call the finally to reach the net zero carbon goals. So, from a business point of view, that all the future products which is coming in also will have that capabilities, as well as you have more smarter management tools, etc., to manage the environment. And one example I will take, this is like a hot topic of, we are talking about 5G, right? So that's one of the biggest challenges we have, the network expansion of these 5G technologies, etc. This is where the carbon issues actually, which is coming into action. So now with the newer technologies which is coming in, which is starting from your towers to etc., which is you have the low carbon sites, low carbon equipment rooms, etc., coming in, green power supply, lithium ion batteries, etc. So this is where the industry is moving in from a technology point of view, which is all the newer installations which is coming in. will have much better, much controlled carbon emissions, which is coming in, driving towards the right direction. And with my last slide, like, as an organization, as Huawei, which is like, we say by 2022, which is generate green power about 695.1 billion kilowatts hours. Save power is about 19.5 billion, and there are so many millions of trees has been planted. The reduction of carbon emission is about 340 million tons. So this is to give us exact, like, indication what create a better planet, greener planet for us. This is how the technology industry is working on. And with that, I will conclude. Possibly, if there are any questions, we can take it up with the panel. Thank you. Over to you, Sachindra.
Thank you very much, Indika. I'm sure in terms of us in the ICT sector would not have thought that we are contributing 1.4% to this global problem. We would have thought that our companies are paperless, therefore, and we do remote work, and therefore we must be the lowest polluters in the world. But apparently, it's not the case, especially with higher technologies being used, your blockchains, your big data centers, and especially going into AI, which is petabytes, terabytes of data. More energy consumption will take place. So, what we are going to talk about, especially throughout this time, is while being in IT, there's no stepping back. It's a digital economy. People have to be served. The world will also become more uh, connected. But while doing that, how can we do it responsibly? That's the most important part. So here we are taking a small, I won't say a break, but moving towards a quiz that Axiata Digital Labs have organized for us. Let me share the screen. Okay, hope you see the QR code, and do scan the QR code, and there are certain questions to be answered. We have a break of 5 minutes to answer that, and I've been told that the winners will be announced in the end, and I think there's some surprises being made ready for the winners as well. So please go ahead. Even the panelists can try out the quiz, by the way. Just take about maybe 4 minutes more. Can the host share the link to the quiz on the chat thread if possible? There's a request to share the link on the chat thread. Thank you. It's shared on the chat thread for those who want to click on the link and take 1 minute more for those who haven't finished. Okay, I hope you all were able to fill in the questions, and at the end of our session, we will announce the winners. And now I will stop sharing my screen. Okay. So picking up a few things from what we were discussing. So we started with the moon. We can't go live on the moon. That was established. So we have to somehow survive on this earth. Um, we realize what we have done to this earth, and especially the questions that Ranga put forward to us in terms of what in terms of solutions. How soon? How far? How willing? And then Indika talked about the digital economy, which is prevalent, which is now the intelligent ecosystem, and which is also bringing in solutions for the problems that it itself is creating, which is a great thing. And we spoke about things, I would say, at 30,000 feet, coming from an industry man, the bigger picture. And now we are moving towards a story or the journey that Axiata Digital Labs have taken on towards net zero. We heard a little bit about how Huawei is implementing technology for that same cause, and we are going to delve deeper into Azure Digital Labs and handing over to Adeline to take us through that journey and also to highlight how every tech company, any IT company can do the same or even start small and then scale, just like we tell any company when they start a product, start small, build your MVP, and then scale. Over to you, Adley.
Okay, thank you. All right. Hi everybody. Okay, happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So maybe just to start off, I think two very important points that was presented earlier. You know, about trying to harvest something on the moon. But I think the reality is there are so many people living in this world, and there's so many people on this call today. But I think the one thing we all have in common is, planet is our home, our one and only home. So I think that's something we need to remember. The other very interesting fact is also, I think one of our speakers presented earlier on that, ICT essentially contributes, 1.4% of the total global emissions. Coming from the telco industry, we also know that, the telco industry, out of that 1.4%, 0.4% comes from the telco industry. But the more interesting point to that is that the telco industry have the opportunity to, although we emit 0.4% out of this 1.4%, we have the ability to avoid up to 10 times the amount that we emit. Okay, so I think I will cover some of these as we progressively move through the slides. But that is, I think, one of the more interesting points, that's called the enablement effect. And one of the plus points of a telco industry. So maybe just to put things into perspective, this is just a snapshot, of what the mobile industry looks like. I think everybody would know Axiata as a group have signed up to net zero. We also signed up to the SBTI, which means that we are committing to be net zero by 2050. And by 2030, we would want to cut our emissions by half. That is the very ambitious target. And signing up to SBTI also means signing up to the 1.5 degrees trajectory, which I think you are starting to hear more and more now that, it's becoming almost impossible, or, it's difficult for the world to achieve that 1.5 degrees Celsius trajectory. So putting that aside, why would Axiata as a group want to sign up to that? So I think there are a couple of reasons. The first, GSMA, has been also encouraging all mobile operators to sign up to SBTI. And, within APAC region itself, there are 11, basically telco companies that have committed to net zero. But in doing this, there is also an opportunity for the telco companies, because the mobile industry, or the network connectivity, cloud, it actually enables us to play a bigger role in driving efficiency. Of course, internally we need to be efficient, but externally through technology, through cloud, through our a lot of smart cities, smart grid. All these things are some of the factors that will enable us to make the energy usage, and ultimately emissions to be lesser, or to use energy more efficiently. So for the telco industry also, we do have that opportunity to enable inclusiveness. We connect people. People use their phones. Their usage of phones are also increasing. With the increasing usage of phones, there's also more and more requirement for data. And the requirement for data also means you need to have more um, more towers that you need to build, more data center. So what we see is, there will be an increase in terms of usage. So that's why, telco companies, ICT companies, they have already started taking action now to see how they can be part of this decarbonization journey. But we do also have a challenge. I think one of the main ingredients that is required to enable the decarbonization journey, apart from energy efficiency, is also access to renewable energy. So if you see here, the region where we operate, which is in APAC, when we look at the electricity grid, on average, we only have about 25% of renewables in our electricity grid. That also means that we have a high emission factor, and that also means that our grid is not very clean. And every time we use electricity, we are generating more CO2 emissions. Versus, even if you look at Europe especially, they have a lot more renewables within their grid. They also have a lot more access to renewables. So I think these are some of the challenges that we do see, signing up to net zero or committing to such an agenda located in this part of the world. So this is just a bit of, basically Axiata's approach to climate action. So right after we sign up, or, we committed to the SBTI, a lot of investors started coming to us and say, okay, now you have signed up to this. What is it that you are doing? I think now, I think in the earlier slides, in the earlier presentation, you will have also noticed that there's a lot of requirements for reporting, for transparency. The consumers, the regulators, the investors, they want to make sure that companies are not greenwashing. So they are also asking for transparent, what are you doing? What is really your strategy to get there? So at Axiata, for the group, we have developed a net zero carbon roadmap. You can find this online. And apart from doing that, we also have started on our TCFD journey. This is a 3-year journey. And I think in most of the countries, slowly there is also regulation that's coming up for companies to sign on to TCFD. Essentially, signing on to TCFD means you as an organization would need to understand what is the risk of climate onto your organization. While climate, while you get extreme weather conditions, for example, we as a telco company, what will happen in case of a bad flood, for example, or an earthquake? Are our assets, our towers, will it still be available to enable communication in times of emergency? How ready are we? How are we, where are we positioning our assets? How are we protecting it from extreme weather conditions? So I think these are some of the things that we look at when we started on our TCFD journey. And essentially, this is really our net zero carbon roadmap. If you look at it, it is quite similar to what you will see in most other companies, where strategy number 1 is to always kind of like manage your, keep your house in order. So we look at, how do we decarbonize our own network operations? How do we be more energy efficient? How, what are the opportunities around renewables? As I said, we in this part of the world, access to renewables is tough. So we also have to do a lot of advocacy, essentially work with the government, work with policies to see how a policy is moving in our favor. If you are a factory, you can perhaps put solar panels on your roof. But when you are a telco company, for example, you have all these individual towers and you can't really install solar, solar power or wind power on it. So that's challenging. And there are such other options such as virtual PPAs, power purchase agreements. So to do this, you need to be able to invest in solar farms. And in this part of the world, especially in countries where, Axiata Group are operating, there are, policies are not favorable to enable companies to invest in solar farms, for example. So I think those are one of our challenges. The second strategy is to actually look at our value chain. How do we also get everyone who are part of our value chain? That means from our suppliers right up to our consumers. How do we also get them to be part of this transformation journey? That's essentially the scope 3 emissions. And based on studies or even based on the reports that you see for most companies in Europe that have already completed their scope 3 assessment, scope 3 can make up to 75 to 80% of telco's emissions, as a whole. So this is another area that we will be focusing on. And I think the last one here is we have this agenda to enable an inclusive climate agenda. So what this also means is that, through our technology, how do we avoid the use of carbon, for example? I normally share this simple example. Like in Indonesia, for example, we have created this app which tells the fishermen when is a good time to go out to sea. When is it weather is going to be bad? Where are the fishes located? So how is this linked to efficiency? It simply means that I know exactly where the fish is. So where the fish are, so when I go out, I will not waste fuel as a fisherman. And at the same time, it also protects me. If I know that there's going to be bad weather, I will also plan when do I go out to sea. So I think these are some of the technologies that telco and techco companies are also developing to indirectly reduce emission through carbon avoidance by um, enabling better planning and better understanding of what is happening around us. I'm just going to go through this very quickly. These are just some examples of how we have been approaching the 3 strategies that we have. I think energy efficiency is given. It's also BAU actually because it reduces cost. Renewable energy, we do see more and more of our operating companies um, trying to get access to more renewables. Some of our towers, our telco towers have been fitted with solar panels. Some even have, access to wind energy. So I think this is something where practicable, where feasible, we do look at this. In Malaysia, we also have what they call a bamboo towers. edotco, which is our tower co, they have also invested in some bamboo towers, which are more environmentally friendly. So I think these are some of the things that we are currently doing. This part 2, which talks about transforming our value chain or working with our suppliers, is something that we are currently focusing on. This year, we are establishing what is our scope 3 emissions in total and going to put a target on our scope 3 emissions. And to do this, we do need to work with our suppliers. In a way, we are quite lucky. I know we also had Huawei on the call. We do have a group of suppliers like our Huawei, ZTE, Apple, who are, Ericsson, who are way ahead in this journey. So we do leverage on them through our communication to learn from them and to see how we can do better. But at the same time, we also have our smaller suppliers or the small, medium-sized industry suppliers that work with us. So I think we are also working with collaborating with some of our partners to develop, basically platforms for them to report on their greenhouse gas emissions. Platforms that also enable them to easily calculate their greenhouse gas emissions. So these are some of the things that we're also working on. And I think the last bit here is really on how do we increase our, I think there are two parts to it. One is focus on the enablement effect, but ultimately, I think a lot of studies have also been done that, once you sign up to your net zero agenda, towards the end of your commitment period, there might be this delta that you cannot reduce your greenhouse gas emissions through any one of these, strategy 1 or strategy 2. So you are allowed to offset that emissions. Okay. But that can only be done towards the end of your commitment period. And that's where you can look into some options such as, carbon credits, and I think those are some of the things that are there. And but we will only consider it towards the end of our commitment period. And I think finally for us here at Axiata, we do need to, you cannot look at things in silo. So what we do is we package it, as part of our framework. And I think currently what I'm talking about is really just about climate action, which falls under the pillar advancing green economy. But apart from that, we look at sustainability as a whole. We also focus on, how do we, our tagline is really advancing Asia. What do we do to ensure inclusiveness when we work with our customers? How do we drive an inclusive digital society? We look at people generally, internally, how we work with our talents, communities where we work around, how do we also positively impact those communities? And I think in terms of whatever we do, there's always that big element of having good governance and risk processes in place. So this is really our Axiata sustainability framework. We do also link it to the SDG goals, because whatever we do, it needs to connect to the global, what is it that globally everyone needs to be responsible for. So we do connect our framework to the UN SDGs. And I think this is just a bit on our ESG ratings. For an organization, ESG ratings are important because this is what investors are looking at. Also, as we embark on our net zero journey, these things are also expensive. We also need to invest in technology. So that also means that you need to sometimes you need to borrow money from the bank, you need financing. So finances, even the banking system, the FI industry, they are also looking for organizations to be sustainable, before they actually give you financing. So in a nutshell, this is our sustainability journey. It's not something that happened overnight. We started since 2012. It started off as reporting. Then we started looking at our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. Our tower co started to look into, as I mentioned, they started to build bamboo towers. And then we signed on to SBTI in 2020. And at the end of this year, we are looking to get our targets, our scope 1, 2, and 3 baseline, as well as the targets validated by SBTI. So I think in a nutshell, this is it. But more important is really having it on paper and actually doing it internally. So we do have good governance, I would say, from the board. The board really drives this across the group. We do have a board sustainability committee that look into how we are really moving towards meeting this external commitment that we have done. So I think that's pretty much what I have. You can visit our website. We do have our sustainability report online. And I think that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adeline. And um, it's a very interesting journey that Axiata has taken on, and especially the journey towards net zero, which countries have committed to, and therefore corporates have committed to. Not only that, impressive to see how they look at the different types of ratings, especially in terms of ESG, and also the added incentive for organizations that investors for your next rounds of funding and your growth funding for your expansions, that they also would look at these ratings for a company to support, and that's where the world is heading. So we have now come forth to the Q&A time. So very interesting information being provided for the audience, for the benefit of the audience. I know it was at different levels. We have gone deep into certain areas, but also given some practical solutions or practical ways that of how this is done. So for the benefit of the audience, I would like to pose first a question to uh, Indika in terms of our country, the digital economy in Sri Lanka, Indika, in terms of the visibility that you have from a policy or strategy standpoint of what Sri Lanka is going to embark on. Do you see the green economy being an imperative as an important aspect of our way forward towards 2030?
Definitely yes, definitely yes. So from a digital economic point of view, there's going to be a lot of digital investments coming in, even starting from basic things like the data center to telecom towers to all that. So Adeline also very clearly mentioned, like, this part of the world, the policies has to be get aligned. Yeah, most of the Axiata companies are like, being part. So if we just go on the investment part on the technology, and if it doesn't concentrate on the green part of it or the carbon neutrality, we will get into a lot of. So any policy, like, the first slide what I showed, where the convergence of the industrial revolution which is happening, the top line of the technology and the bottom line coming on the green part of it, that has to be practiced. So any policy which is coming in to the future, specifically on the digital economy from Sri Lankan point of view, again, if you think through, that has to be thought through, and that will be thought through. But again, from a policy point of view, we have few challenges, like, even from a solar point of view, like, whether how the rooftop should be allowed, or the buyback from the guarantee, etc. These policies has to be improved. So from a overall digital economic point of view, we have to overlook all these environment when we are doing. That's definitely simply it's a yes, and it's super critical to make sure that that has been done.
Thank you, Indika. Going back to Adeline and in the journey of net zero, I'm sure there was a point that you started. For those tech companies who are on this call, who would maybe like to take that first step, what would you advise uh, a tech company on how to take that first step? What is that first instance of planning that they should have?
All right. So I think, as I mentioned, you just hit the tone from the top. So the board needs to be on board. And to get the board on board, actually there are three things that you need to have in place. The first is data. You need to know what is your emissions, what's your total emissions, where is your emissions coming from, because they also need to understand how much, and where is all this problem, or where are these sources of emissions are coming from. The second question that they will also have is, basically, what is the cost of wanting to do this? Um, so it may be difficult to estimate the cost, but when you look at cost, there is also the opportunities in terms of what can you gain from doing this. So I think this is the second part that you need to establish. And the third part is really the capability in terms of the expertise to do this, because I think the board would also appreciate that you have the right capability to actually know how to do it. Again, when you talk about embedding sustainability within the operations, you got to do it across all the different functions. It should not only reside with sustainability. So that person or that team that's going to lead it also needs to be capable. Otherwise, you will end up spending a lot on third-party consultants coming in to do all this work for you. So I think these are the three areas that you need to have when you start your journey. But definitely it's what gets measured gets managed, is knowing what is your total amount of emissions and where are these emissions coming from. So that would be step one.
Thank you. That's interesting that Ranga also mentioned measuring, reporting, and verification is how ICT can definitely uh, be useful for companies, for corporates in moving towards a green economy. And that's the place, or measuring is a place, as Adeline said, to start as well. We have some questions coming in, which I will take up. And we're moving to Ranga. Adeline brought in a good point, the good terminology called, which is greenwashing. So being in this space for a long time, Ranga, as the technology industry of the world, um, what do you see how would the technology, where are we going wrong? Where are we being irresponsible? And where do you see that taking place? And maybe aspects of greenwashing that you see in the technology industry, if you have examples, so that we know that this is not the way to go about things in this space.
Thanks, Sachindra. I think it's not only the IT industry, but I think in most of the sectors we have seen this, what you call the greenwashing. Basically, you highlight a small component of good thing, but to deliver that good thing, you do so many bad things behind the scenes. So that's what's happening. One of the biggest thing is that I think most of the companies who are doing greenwashing is lack of the holistic picture. They have a bit of a what you call the tunnel vision. They look at only one aspect of the environment, but forget about the others. I'll take a completely different industry. Let's take the automobile industry. We're talking about electric vehicles. And the electric vehicles, of course, reduce emissions and stuff. But now we are looking at the back end, the value chain of the electric vehicle manufacturing, and the other environmental destructions in terms of the material extraction towards the battery manufacturing and lack of recycling batteries for disposable batteries, creating another huge impact. And the gains that we are taking from the emission reduction from the ICE vehicles, the internal combustion engine, have been, of course, overshot by the other environmental destructions we're creating it. So the entire point is that having an integrated viewpoint is quite important. An analysis of the entire material energy the chain of an industry is quite important. And once you have that, the holistic view, I think it's quite easy. I think I'm endorsing what Adeline mentioned, that data is playing a big role, but gathering data should be integrated. You need to look at the a wide angle vision, not a very narrow tunnel vision into that.
Thank you. I will get into questions, and in the audience there are different types of tech companies, startups, and SMEs also would be able to support companies in their journey. They've put certain comments there. So I took this point from Adeline in terms of going to net zero. It not only suffices for the company itself to be net zero, the suppliers, everyone in that value chain have to have the same principle, have to have that same focus. You mentioned Huawei and other companies going there. So just to get some put forward some of those questions to you, Adli, in terms of this is a software developers question, if I may pose it to you. How can software developers make their applications more environmental friendly? That's one question. And I will combine it with um, what are the most significant barriers that prevent widespread adoption of eco-conscious computing practices in the technology industry? If I may ask those two questions from you, at least.
Okay. I'll go with the first one first. I think in terms of coming up with technology to help us to be greener, or maybe let's lump it as greener products. I think it is always coupled with, again, technology on its own is not good enough. You need to also have good connectivity, good cloud. So that's why you have the 5G. So I think that couples together. But definitely, a few things that we are seeing quite a lot these days is that just before I joined Axiata, I was actually with an FMCG company, and I used to take care of the entire region. But from where I was sitting in KL, I could see the energy and water usage in 12 of our plants, 12 of the factories located in different parts of the world. That's because they had an online monitoring system. So that enabled me to, really track or see. Sometimes you can see a spike in energy usage, water usage. You can trigger the plant. So all these things, again, when it comes to data and monitoring, the faster you get information, the faster you react, the better you can save. So I think when it comes to green products, there are just so many things that can be done. One of the more, how do I put it? One of the more popular things that we are seeing now, I think a lot of Singapore-based companies are also offering systems, basically cloud-based platforms for you to actually report on your greenhouse gas emissions, for example. Why that is important is because these platforms enable you to get the information directly from the source. That means if you're looking at your electricity bills, if you're looking at how much your fuel you consume, when it gets it directly, the information is more accurate when you calculate the CO2 emissions. It saves time, and it really gives you a more verifiable and accurate outcome when you are doing your tracking of your information. So I think these are some examples, but there are really so many that's out there. I may or may not be answering your question, because there is really a lot of ways to do it. What was the second question again, if you don't mind?
Second question was on what are the barriers that prevent a company, in the technology industry, moving towards eco-conscious computing practices? What are some of the barriers?
Eco-conscious. So I think one of the things that you see generally in the within the tech world as a whole is, I think equipments that are being developed now, even like our phones and all, it's not really built to last. So that on its own, it's not great, you know. So I think that's one. I think that's one of the areas that can be improved. Other barriers is I think I think it's a lot around developing more efficient kind of products. So that's the second one. Yeah, can't think of any right now, but yeah, those are some examples.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that attempt, and maybe I'll ask a similar question from Indica also. On the one thing that Adelina answered, which is how can examples of companies which have implemented such eco-conscious computing practices. I would like to tie it up with maybe instances of how they've used other smaller, or I would say partner companies, SMEs or startups, to help their company, the principal company, in moving towards more eco-conscious company practices. Any examples that could provide the indicator?
Yep. So, I mean, say little add to the answer what Adeline also touch upon, right? So challenges is that we are moving through the cycle. Now, say there's a lot of computing. which is, say, we take example of Sri Lanka, there are a lot of computing in it. In the country, it can be starting from your cell phone to the PCs, etc. Now, how do you do the recycling of that? Because that's super critical, because there you have what we simply call is e-waste, right? So when the newer products coming in with the better, greener options, but we have 7 years, 8 years, all this equipment. Now you just, whether you throw it on the roadside or do we have a proper system of recycling of these, and how do you manage this? Unless we manage this environment, even how good we be trying to be in the future, but if he doesn't manage that, what we have in hand also, that's going to be a major challenge. So now, say, that is where I think where one of the key things is these companies or the startups actually can play a huge role, right? We have seen companies in Sri Lanka itself is doing that, talking about the e-waste focus, even not e-waste alone, plastic, etc. How they do that and how they getting into recycling, etc. So there's a lot of value additions coming in, because say when from a large corporate point of view, they will not able to diverse or getting into this kind of niche area, especially from a business point of view. Whereas they will definitely partner with these startups and the smaller companies or SMEs coming in with these great solutions, and they will solve a lot of bigger problems within large organizations they have. So that is, I think, across the world, we have seen these kind of models are built up. The startups, etc., coming up with very, very innovative, very niche solutions for such. So it can go up to the level of an e-waste, to how you do your creating dashboards, and how your management can view certain applications, etc. So now, from a larger corporates or the multinational point of view, they have these goals, they are committed, and it becomes very critical for them for certain gradings, even as you mentioned, investors coming in, etc. They are really looking into it. So this is where they will make use of this chain, which is the startups, etc., bringing in, and to achieve those goals. I think there are many examples around the world. We can see that that entire ecosystem is getting merged. So there's a huge role for newer technologies, which is startups are bringing it in.
Thank you, Indika. We have about 3 minutes more, and of course, I have to announce the winners at the end as well of the quiz. To Ranga, in terms of a very broader perspective, Ranga, I know in our industry, our tech industry is organized. We have very good professional associations, industry associations, which are driving, have been driving, and are driving ethics of this industry. Certain when it comes to HR practices, there are collective efforts being made. So, and even right now, we see the associations talking about and driving ESG as an industry, because that is how we want to be seen in the world as well. What would you advise industry bodies or organizations who are working with the IT sector as a whole in a macro perspective? What would you advise as steps to take in driving an entire industry towards a green economy, and be conscious about the green economy?
Thanks. I think it's a very valid question. One of the biggest gaps that I have seen in Sri Lanka is that the kind of siloed approach in Sri Lanka. For example, let's take the climate target setting, the national determined contribution. The lead has been taken by the Ministry of Environment, and there's been a lot of consultations and stuff. And if you look at the national determined contribution targets, you might see that there's no targets related to the IT industry, or no contribution from the IT industry there. I think it's because of the participation or engagement of the industry. It's not for IT. I know there are several industries, those who have not been managed to get into the space of national target setting, because that's quite important, isn't it? Ultimately, it goes to the global level setting. So I think the active engagement is quite important. I see there's a lot of potential that the IT sector can contribute to achieve whatever the national level targets that we have set. So we have a big opportunity in 2025, where the next cycle of national determined contribution enhancement is pending. according to the Paris Agreement. So I do believe the association can play an active role and review the existing targets and the sectors. And probably you can voluntarily come up with, okay, these are the contributions that we can make. It's not only the contribution in terms of what IT industry can do alone, but at the same time, how the industry can assist the other main industries to achieve their targets. For example, energy. I think we are struggling to establish smart grids in Sri Lanka. How we can do that? So I think there are mutual way of do it. I think there's lack of synergy. I don't say lack. I think it's at the low level, but I think we can push it up a little, and we need to pull up our socks a little bit more and engage in this national policy making and actively engage and do some little bit more contribution.
Thank you, Ranka. I think that nicely brought us to certain conclusions and a good close. Takeaways for the panelists also, Indika, what we can do as an industry, setting some goals for ourselves and aligning with it. And also at Lean, there are startups and new companies in Sri Lanka who's looking for mentoring and also support. So whether we could look at presenting some of them to you. In terms of tech SMEs who can support other companies. And Ranga, please advise as you have been and doing, and also as a mentor for some other companies who are on this call. And I hope you could provide a bit of your time to guide them into solving this great issue that you have, committed a lot of your lifetime to in solving. So now we would bring the Q&A session to a close. I think the audience hopefully have received some valuable input on where you could start your journey. And you're not alone on this journey. Then we are not talking about an industry coming together. And Indika has spoken about how the digital economy and at a policy level, how the country is moving towards it. So this is the great time to think about it, but not only think about it, but act on it and start. So if you need any support, there are many who would help you, passionate people who could help you on your journey. So with that, the formalities will be brought to a close, and I will now move to announcing the winners. Right, the winners. Yes, the screen. Okay, I'll just announce the winners. The winners are of the competition: Waldi Siafe, Gauri Shankar, and Shazan Hisham. So congratulations, guys. And Axiata will be having a surprise lined up to you. They'll contact you on when and how to collect it. So it has been an interesting session. We just about 3 minutes past our time. We actually started 5:03, so we're actually on time. Thank you, panelists, for a wonderful session on sharing your knowledge and depth. And thank you for the participants who engaged. And we had more than 100 participants during our peak time. So now we've still have more than 60 people still on this webinar, which gives us hope that there are people to take this message forward. Thank you once again for the organizers on behalf of ICTA and Axiata Digital Labs. We thank you all the participants, and hope this would not end with just conversation. We'll end with action, because it's important how soon, how far, and how willing are we in looking forward to a digital and a green and a blue economy, which will be our next discussion very soon. Thank you to everyone, and have a pleasant evening.